Alright, so continuing on with the Illustrator tips and tricks here. The next thing that we're going to look at is the width tool. And this can be a really handy tool in Illustrator for creating different shapes and applying different widths to strokes. So I'm just going to create some kind of organic shapes here and kind of give you guys an idea of what I'm talking about. Actually, let's go this way with it. So what's great about this tool is, anytime you're trying to create a specific width to some sort of line, it can be difficult to actually create that line and then come back with the pen tool and sort of retrace it and get some varying widths inside there. So the width tool kind of makes that for you. It kind of does that for you there. So it's over here. It's Shift W is the, and this is the icon for the actual tool. So the first thing that I do when I'm using the width tool is I'll come over to my strokes palette, and for any of the lines that I make, I'll usually make those a butt cap so it's sort of rounded, and you can even make them a little bit thinner if you'd like to as well. And the first thing you need to do is select the actual shape, and then all you do is just grab the width tool and select a point on the line where you want to make some sort of change to the width. And you just click and you drag out, and you can make it be as wide or as thin if you'd like within that specific area. Now you can make these in several points. Let's say I want to thin it out a little bit right there and then thicken it back up a little bit here as well. You can make those at several points within the line, and then as long as you go back to this width tool, you can actually make adjustments back to those as well. You can sort of change where they're at, or maybe make them a little bit thicker if you want to, or thinner in places. So it can be a really handy tool for changing the width to these different lines. So again, for this one here, I'm just going to come over to my width tool. This time I'm going to grab the sort of edge of it here, and then kind of come in and just create some points where it gets a little bit wider and a little bit thinner, just really playing up the manipulation here. As you can see, I'm going to go a little bit thick there and then go really thin over here at the end. So you can see how we can create some really nice organic shapes, varying the width of those very simply through this as well. So this was just a quick pattern that I made by doing the same thing. I just kind of created a box here. Scoot this guy over so we can do it to the side. And I applied a color to it with a standard width. And then by using the width tool, I can just go in here and start to actually dictate the different sizes of these. So I could maybe make my corners be a little bit smaller if I wanted to, and have the other edges be a little bit larger. And then, with this sort of width tool, I could go in here and create an overall pattern in some way if I wanted to do that as well, just by duplicating these and applying some different scale to this. So you can see how really quickly you could get an overall pattern and be able to manipulate these a little bit further just by the manipulation of that width tool. So that's one step that we can do there. The next thing that we're going to look at is the custom pattern stroke. And this is a really handy tool for borders, or for some sort of treatment. Maybe if you're doing some sort of piping or something where you're going to have a line with a consistent pattern or within that stroke. So what I did was I just created a couple of individual shapes here. I created a square and these two different circles. And what I'm hoping to do is have this become basically a pattern that's going to follow along this path that I've created here. So in order to do that, the first thing I need to do is bring up my brushes, and you can see that I've already kind of created a couple of these here. And once I have my brushes open, all I need to do is actually just select the shapes that I want to become that brush stroke, and I can just select them all at the same time and just drag them right over into my brushes. You'll notice that a little plus icon pops up, and I'm just going to let go of the mouse. And it's going to give me some options here for this new brush. Do I want it to be a scatter brush, an art brush, or a pattern brush? In this particular case, we want to use this as a pattern brush. So I'm going to click OK. And it actually gives me the ability to name this. I'm going to call this square circles. And you can kind of dictate some, if you want it to be fixed or if you want it to have pressure, depending if you're using a pin, if you want it to have some tilt to it and select the variance there. In this particular case, I'm just going to leave it fixed. It also gives you the opportunity to change how you want to treat your corners and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get too far into that, but one thing that we can do here is go to stretch to fit or approximate path. I'm going to go ahead and click approximate path here, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what that's done is it's brought this new brush for me here, this square circles. You can see that I titled it there. So I've already made this path with this blue stroke to it here, but I actually want it to have that brush. So all I need to do is just come over here to my brush, click on that, and it's going to actually just apply that to the entire path here. So you can see how valuable this would be for borders, or again, some sort of overall pattern that you're overlaying into a path. And from there, right now these circles are sort of right butted up next to this other one. It's basically starting and stopping. If you look at this as being an overall shape, they're kind of just butted up right next to each other. So I can actually just double click into that brush if I want to and adjust this further if I wanted to space this out a little bit, maybe 10%. Again, you could start to play with some tilt or some bearing if you wanted to have that, have some sort of change to that, or rotation, I guess, even throughout that as well. You can kind of play with those options a little bit further there as well. That's not making a huge change here because of the specific pattern that we have, but in others it would kind of, you can experiment how these would change. But in theory, this gives you the ability to change these strokes into overall patterns and apply them to different parts of the illustration as well. So that's a really handy tool. So let's see, we have two other things we're going to look at here. We have our halftone swatches and lines. So this is, this guy here. So this is a really helpful one here. Some people have asked me how to create these overall patterns, and we saw this in the very beginning when we were working with the global colors as well. And one way to do this is by creating a pattern up here through the object. So if we come up here to Object and go to Pattern, Make, it's basically going to bring up this new square for us here. And I'm going to decrease the size of this a little bit. I'm going to go 0.5 by 0.5. Whoops, I realize this is not in your guys' window. Excuse me. Let me pull this over. So I just changed the actual size and the height here to 0.5. I could even go smaller if I wanted to. If I wanted to go to 0.25 and 0.25, maybe we'll do that for this particular one. And so basically that brings up this sort of square here. It gives me the option of different sort of patterns, and you'll see how that changes here in a second. But let's start applying some shapes inside here. So if I go to my ellipse and I create some different circles and apply a solid color to that, what I can actually do here is I'm going to bring that right to the center. As long as my smart guides are on, it's going to sort of tell me where that center is. And you can see that it's already starting to create this pattern, right? So any change that I make, it's making that throughout the pattern. It's giving me essentially a preview here. And this is where you can see where the brick by brick sort of staggers them. The brick by column is going to stagger them in a different way. Hexagon column, it's just different ways that they're kind of sandwiched together here. But in this particular one, we're going to stick with grid. So I have this circle in the very center, and then to make this pattern seem seamless, I'm going to actually bring these circles onto the outside corners and line them up with the corners as well. So I'm going to do that on each one of these corners, and even though it doesn't look like it's actually changing much to the pattern, it is, and we'll see why here in a second. We can see even in the preview of our pattern, what we have is we have this circle in the center and then these circles on each corner. And what that's allowing it is this illusion of overlap. So it basically creates this seamless pattern here. So once we've done that, we've created the shapes within this invisible one, or this invisible square. I'm going to go ahead and click Save a Copy. And it's going to bring up this new pattern. I'm going to hit New and hit OK. And I'll hit OK here again. And then I'm going to actually click Done up here at the top. Now what you'll notice is it actually disappeared, right? because all we were doing was actually creating a pattern. We actually weren't creating any sort of marks on the page. We were just manipulating a pattern here. But what's really cool is if I create a sort of organic shape here, I'm just going to use my pencil tool. Whoops. Sorry, guys. I'll just use my pen tool here. If I create a shape on that specific layer, now what I can actually do is I can bring that pattern into this specific shape just by clicking on that new pattern that I've made here. I need to make sure that I'm on the fill and not the stroke. But what that gives me the ability to do is have this fill in this shape no matter what the size or the shape of it is, right? And it's going to kind of create this seamless pattern here. And you can see how this would be really handy for creating some sort of textile, or even some sort of shading, halftone pattern, or some sort of lines here as well. So same thing can be done with the sort of line pattern here. So if we come over here to the object, I'm just going to do this quickly. Go to make a new pattern. Again, I'm going to make this 0.25 by 0.25. And this time I'm going to just fill half of this square with a rectangle, essentially. So I'm just going to go halfway filled, and I'm going to apply this color to it. Whoops, sorry, now I keep putting those patterns in there. And we can see now how this would, again, start to create an overall striped pattern for us. If we wanted to put it on the diagonal, as long as we are stretching out throughout the entire composition, we could do that as well. I'm going to keep this one on the straight. Again, I'm going to save this as a copy. I'm going to put lines, go to OK, and done. And now I can actually use this new one to create this line pattern here as well. So it's really awesome. We can always double click inside here and make any sort of changes if you needed to. If you wanted to actually do the brick by row, or if you wanted to change the brick offsets, so on and so forth, the overlap style, lots of different changes that we can do here. And if we wanted to, we can always click done and sort of make that our new pattern in there as well. So it's really cool to be able to give us the ability to make these and be able to overlap these different shapes, and again have this pattern work in the same way for each one of these that we're creating here as well. Oh, that was the new one there. So that is creating the different halftone swatches and lines. And just to show you a little bit further on how these can be utilized, I'm going to go ahead and just erase this one. We can see how we're utilizing this sort of line pattern here to give the illusion of some depth within this sphere here. So if I wanted to do something similar to this, I could just create an ellipse here. I'm going to make it this solid color that I have. And I'm just going to actually copy. Let's go up to Edit, Copy, and paste in front. And this time I'm just going to bring in this ellipse a little bit further here, right? And if I actually, let's see, if I copy this original ellipse that we have, and again we paste that in front and send that to the back, now I can take these two previous ones that I've made, and by using the shape builder tool, I can just get rid of these shapes just so I have this sort of little splinter here that I've created. And I can do something where I give that a solid, and then again create a copy of this one here, copy, paste in front, bring this one over a little bit further even, whoops. And again, I'm going to copy this back one and paste it in front, send that to the back. And now again, I have these two. I'm going to go ahead and again use my shape builder just to create this next little compartment where we get a little bit more of a sliver. And now we can actually use this sort of this pattern that we've created in the past step to give this illusion of this sort of these lines that are utilizing the same color but giving a sort of halftone approach to that, so that it kind of gives the look that it's almost like a tonal quality of that, but still only utilizing two colors there.